Conversations with GIPR, which is the stock symbol for Generation Income Properties, is the only podcast hosted by a CEO of a public net lease REIT. While there is plenty of information and analytical data to help you understand the net lease REIT sector, I take a look at what it takes to grow a company and ask our guests some of the tough questions on how they did the same. If you're interested in learning more about just what you can find in a spreadsheet, Conversations with GIPR may be for you.
David Sobelman is the CEO for Generation Income Properties. All opinions expressed by David or any guest of Conversations with GIPR are solely opinions and do not reflect the opinions of the company. Any remarks in this podcast, other than purely historical information, may include forward-looking statements and as such are subject to the risks and uncertainties that are discussed in our SEC filings, and actual results may vary materially from those suggested in any forward-looking statements. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions.
So I am here with Angela Kral. Mm-hmm. Well, I know what you do for a living, mm-hmm. and I think I need to disclose to the audience that this is literally the first time we've ever met. But I know what you do, mm-hmm. And I know the name of your institution. But this is very unique for us because usually we have some sort of businessy, mm-hmm. Financy, technical, legal sort of topic to discuss. And then we give you color on those aspects. But this is really the first time that's not a huge component of our conversation today. And so tell us the name of your institution and your title.
Okay, so I own and run South Tampa Microschool. I don't really give myself a lot of a title, uh-huh. But I'll say administrator.
Okay, and then in our language, that would be CEO.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good, yeah. I guess we could say that.
Right. And so you are the founder.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And you kind of ran through the name quickly. So South Tampa Microschool.
Right. And
there's a lot to unpack there, right? So we live in Tampa. We're talking to a true entrepreneur, but in education. Mm-hmm. Is that fair?
I would consider myself to be more of an educator who got into entrepreneurship. But sure.
Okay. All right. And then you named your institution something very specific, mm-hmm. which I had never heard the word, because it's one word, microschool. Mm-hmm. I've never heard that word before. What does that mean?
So it's a purposely small school, basically. It's this is kind of a new movement in education. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a boutique school, versus a big box. Mm-hmm. So our goal is to keep small classes and to never let the school grow to 500 kids, let's say.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how many kids are in your school?
As of today, 100 exactly.
100 mm-hmm. for pre-K through sixth grade?
We have six.
Yeah. See, I did my research.
Yeah. We're up to six now.
Yeah. And because you weren't in middle school until this year.
Until this year. We just expanded.
Right. All right. So this is very interesting. So what do you think your max capacity can be if you're at 100 right now?
I used to say it was 80 and then I said 100. Mm-hmm. So 150, I would say, as we grow up through eighth, I don't think we could ever go over that. Okay. And still do what we do.
Okay. So our listeners are probably saying Dave, why do you have a school on? What are you trying to prove here? And Emily Kuzmano, who's our director of operations, is a parent in your school. Mm-hmm. And she says, Dave, you have to meet Angela. She has the most amazing story. She is perfect for the podcast.
Aww. That's very nice.
And do you know why she would say that?
No, honestly. I mean, we've had a lot of experiences and learned a lot over the years. Uh-huh. So yeah, there's a lot there, I guess. Yeah.
What does that mean? There's a lot there.
From starting in my house, we started our little school in my house during COVID to now an actual school with 100 kids in it is kind of, it's kind of an unusual thing.
You're skipping over a lot.
Yes, there's a lot in between that. A lot happens in those years too. Right?
Okay. So March 2020, the world shuts down and you are doing what, where?
So at that time I was teaching at Mitchell Elementary in South Tampa. So I had been a school administrator for a few years prior. And then after my first daughter was born, I did that for about another year and then went back to teaching. And so at that point I was teaching, I was doing a job share because I had my oldest and then I had a baby also at that point. So, and then,
and he had a baby.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
So I was teaching part-time at Mitchell, basically. A little lost, to be honest with you.
Okay. So,
yeah.
So everyone's relegated to their homes. So the remainder of the year, you're kind of teaching
online
to elementary, like what ages?
So I taught 4th grade that year. So I was teaching my math online to my 4th graders.
All right. So they know plus and minus by that point.
Oh, yeah.
And they know how to sit at a desk at that point.
Yeah. It wasn't, I think like, a lot of the online learning, it was like, we all just kind of it just happened.
Right.
Nobody was expecting it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even like teaching classes online for the most part. You'd have like half your kids show up and you're trying to check work and, it was just kind of an unusual thing.
Parents wouldn't make their kids.
Oh yeah. There was always, yeah.
Really?
I think a lot of people just gave up at that point. They're just like, cause parents are trying to work from home. All their kids are there too. And, we would always send assignments and the kids a lot of times would do their assignments, but they wouldn't come to the online class. And there's kids who can't really access that too. So
I learned that during that period where some people just don't have Wi-Fi at home.
Right.
Or they don't have a computer at home.
Right.
Right. And then you're still obligated to teach them at a distance with no resources.
Yes. So I think that's why you see a lot of gaps today, from that time period. Because some kids just didn't have school for months, really. They didn't get to do much.
Are you seeing it in test scores and?
Not so much in what I do, but I think it's mentioned a lot to us in families coming to us from other schools, particularly from public schools that, had that like year or more gap, because even that second year, some kids were still online, schools were closing all the time. Somebody got COVID and then we all closed for 10 days, So there's definitely some learning gaps there.
Okay. So in 21, you were still working in public education.
No, I didn't go back to a public school after 2020.
Okay.
So I opened my little pod in August 2020. So when my daughter had been in kindergarten when the shutdown happened. So for her first grade year, we opened our little pod and that's how it all started.
Out of your house.
Yeah. We were in my dining room. So we had 8 kids in my dining room initially. Yeah.
What ages?
We were all kindergarten and first that year because my daughter was in first. And then, so we took kindergartners also. I had been doing, over the summer, I had been doing these online camps. So like, our mom's page in South Tampa is pretty active. So I would just post like my links to things I was doing with my own kids at home and like I just shared a curriculum with people. So I got a little bit of a following through sharing. And so then when I was like, hey, I think I'm going to do this, then I had a lot of people interested because everybody was looking for something different in that fall. A lot of people didn't want to go back to school.
Your product, your idea is a product of the pandemic.
Completely. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
I'm not sure this would be here if COVID hadn't happened, really. Yeah. So even though it's, I wouldn't say COVID was a great thing for anybody, but for what I do, it was amazing. It kind of allowed me to like live out a dream that I probably wouldn't have been able to live out otherwise.
So let's go back. You have 8 children sitting at your table, probably masks on, right?
Within like a month. Yeah, we did.
Oh yeah.
We were trying to just isolate from everybody else. In the world,
I see.
That's really hard with 8 different families. So
I thought you were going to take like a Florida route. Like, no, we don't believe in masks,
No.
you know, right?
Right. Yeah,
right.
we believed in it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just for the listeners, you know, we do have masks in Florida, you know, when needed. Right?
Yes. We would wear the masks. Yeah.
All right, good. And so you have an entire year at your dining room table. Is that accurate?
I mean, we also ventured into my living room.
Okay.
For the most part, it was my dining room, playroom.
That was your
room.
expansion plan?
Yeah,
right?
that was how we went up to 10 kids that year. So we had to go into the living room.
Uh-huh.
I just got my new couch because that one was ruined after that. But yeah, that was basically just throughout my house.
Right.
Yeah.
So every morning the kids are dropped off at your house.
Mm-hmm.
Parents go to work and they come back at 2:00 and and you have educated their children for 7 hours.
Yeah, a little shorter day at that point, but yeah, basically, yeah. So, yeah, we were, you know, it was like a really unique experience though, because we were in my house. So we were like cooking and, you know, it was a good mix of like, you know, it wasn't like kids sitting doing worksheets. It still isn't, you know, that's the whole point, right? Is that we're having these experiences and doing things and learning that way.
Okay. Yeah. But you have to plan for each moment of each day.
Every teacher does that. Yes.
Right.
Yes, we do.
And you need time to do that.
Sure.
So where'd you find that time?
So the baby was napping. Then, so like right after school, like my daughter was, I think actually she probably was about 2 when this started. So she would nap, and my older daughter who was in the school I would give her her iPad just, you know, and then I would spend, you know, an hour and a half working on my plans.
Right.
And then when my husband got home, you know, in the evening, if I needed to do more, I'd do it then. So
is that when the handoff comes?
Yeah,
like,
sometimes.
Take the baby.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. She doesn't,
Right.
But she doesn't always want that. But when I could, you know.
That's great.
Yeah.
So clearly you're passionate about education.
For sure.
Yeah. Where did that come from?
So I mean, I've been an educator for more than 20 years. Both my parents are educators. My sister's an educator.
Mm-hmm.
It probably came from my parents more than anything, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so you never contemplated starting your own venture until 2020. Is that right?
I wouldn't say I never I dreamed of it,
mm-hmm.
you know, because there would be times when I was, especially after my daughter started school,
mm-hmm.
when I was working in the public schools and you know, which there's things to enjoy about working in public schools too, mm-hmm. but there's also a lot of like testing culture right now. So mm-hmm. we would be, you know, preparing kids for another test. And I would just think to myself, gosh, this is not what I want my daughter to do when she gets to be this age. So what if I could do it differently, mm-hmm. like a pipe dream, but nothing where I ever considered actually doing it.
So we're going to get into your growth and, you know, we're kind of slowly doing that now.
Mm-hmm.
But most people who start something that they want to scale, they want to grow, there's a plan. And sometimes people like buy a franchise, right? There's franchise schools.
Yeah, there
right?
are for what I do. Yeah.
Sure. And they give you a game plan. Like, here's mm-hmm. what you need. Here's how much space here's roughly how much it'll cost, you know, but you chose a different route.
Right. Yeah.
Why?
I mean, honestly, I didn't really plan to be an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I started doing it because I didn't want to bring my daughter back to public school. I didn't want to bring myself back to public school in the
mm-hmm.
middle of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And it just worked really well.
Mm-hmm.
And we wanted to keep doing it. It
mm-hmm.
felt like we stumbled into like a better way of educating kids. And so,
but it's your way. Is that right?
It is my way, but it's also like there's other people. There's a lot of, they call them edupreneurs. There's a lot of other people doing this now too. Yeah. So there's a lot of amazing options in the micro school space.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I kind of do get to decide how we do it.
Yeah. That's
which
cool.
is nice, you know.
So now we're 2024
mm-hmm.
and Emily coached me on this next part here.
Okay.
And so, you know, we're a real estate company.
Yeah.
And so we're real estate nerds. And we understand that you had to very quickly learn about real estate and real estate finance
mm-hmm.
and construction
mm-hmm.
and
zoning.
Zoning.
Yeah.
And am I right in saying like in a 3-month period? Is that
for our current?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So as you're transitioning from your living room, dining room, living room, where did you go?
So the building we're in now is actually the first place we went from
Okay.
my house. But we originally rented like one room in this community center building. We're in the prep of South Tampa. So it's it was like a little warehousey looking, not that little, but a warehousey looking room on the top floor.
Okay.
And we just moved everything in.
I need to tee up the audience because most of our listeners don't live in Tampa, let alone South Tampa.
Okay.
So they're kind of nationwide or global.
Gotcha.
So you said the prep of South Tampa. What that building is, for people who don't know, it's a former Boys and Girls Club building that was vacated, and that was taken over by 3 entrepreneurs who had a mission to provide a similar type of experience for after school programs and weekends and so on.
Right.
And they ran that for 10 years out of this vacated Boys and Girls Club.
Right.
And called the Prep.
Right.
And now you have changed the entire use of the building from like a lot of big open spaces, kind of Boys and Girls Clubby sort of spaces, to a 100 student operating school.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And you started doing that. How did it come about that you knew that you needed, how many square feet is it?
The whole building? The whole building is like 20,000 square feet.
Right. So you went from your living room to one room.
Right.
To 20,000 feet.
Right. That sounds,
in 2 years.
I get 2, 3 years. I think over 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah. Because we slowly started taking more parts of the building. And then, so we have had like adventures in real estate over the years. Like we purchased a home thinking it could be a school. It couldn't. We attempted to purchase a daycare thinking we could convert that to a school, but we eventually backed out of the purchase because it had so many issues. It was too much for us to do, too much work.
Yep.
And then all that time we had been in this community center, kind of just being like somebody else's tenant, having to like share spaces with other tenants there too sometimes.
Who are not always congruent with what you do.
Yeah,
correct.
Definitely. That was tough, you know? And then one day I just sent an email to the owner of the building kind of on a whim and said, hey, what would it take for me to have this whole building? I think the title of the email was like complete long shot. And then like the next day we had a meeting, and a couple of weeks later we signed a lease. So you never know unless you ask, I guess, You
just gave me chills. That's exactly how we operate.
Yeah.
Don't ask, don't get.
Right. Yeah. Why not do you have to lose?
Right.
So yeah, that's how that happened.
And that's a very quick process. And so you had the foresight to know that you wanted a complete building because you wanted your own brand. You wanted to be able to say, this is the school.
Right. Yeah. And to be able to change things to fit our needs like in the way we did. Yeah.
So how did you do that? So like, let's start with that planning process. Like, how do you know what your needs are?
I think from being there for so long and then having like experience in schools, we knew we wanted divided classrooms because we were in, a large warehousey type space with a curtain splitting 2 classrooms. So it was noisy. Yeah. That kind of thing. You learn like what you're looking for as you
want
go.
a wall.
Yeah. Walls. Bare minimum. Right. And then we knew we wanted like a certain aesthetic too. Just from, that what matches like our education philosophy, which is like a more calming, nature-based philosophy. So yeah, that's kind of how we knew. And then I also was lucky enough to we have a great community of parents. So one of them is like a commercial designer, interior designer. And so she helped us a lot too.
So Emily told me to talk to you about that relationship that you have with the parents.
Yeah.
Because she says it's very unique and probably the main reason why she's there.
So yeah, it's a community, you know, because I think, you know, when my kids first started school, especially my oldest, like, you know, you kind of want someone to like love your kids. I wasn't really concerned about what she was going to learn, right? Because she was like 3. So I didn't really care if she learned or didn't at that
Right.
way. But I wanted someone to like love and care for her in my absence while I was at work. And so I think like I go into the school and I look for teachers in the school that will put that first. Like we say, lead with love, because that's more important than, you know, the test score. So I think that's kind of how the relationships develop, is that it's more of a like a loving relationship with the kids and their families too.
We have a core value at our company. We call it being relational. And it's a thread that goes through literally every communication that we have. So whether it's an email, a voicemail, Teams meeting, personal interaction, like you will feel that we value that relationship.
Right.
And you have that same thing.
Right.
And the parents see that.
Right.
Do you think that's been the cornerstone of your growth?
Quite possibly. Yeah. I think it's a combination of things, but I think, yeah, people mention our community first, which is that not just my relationship with everybody, but the relationship that the families have with each other. You know, it's the whole community as a whole.
And where did you learn that?
I think it's inherent. I don't think you do learn that, you know. I think that's just like who I am as a person. And that's the kind of people that I try to hire also is.
So your parents?
Yeah. Yeah, probably. Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. You're taking your family values and instilling them into your work.
That's a very good way to put it. I've never thought of it that way, but that's a really good way to put it. Yeah.
TM. I just trademarked that.
Okay.
Yeah. So tell me about your kind of trial by fire of learning how to navigate the real estate process in such a short period on such a large space.
Right.
Because, you know, we know buildings and 20,000 feet is not small.
Right.
We have some small buildings, like we own like Starbucks buildings, and they're about 2,500 square feet. So you're about 10 times the size.
10 Starbucks.
Right.
Yeah.
And we know how much work goes into 2,500 square feet. It's months and months of work. So now you're given 10 times that.
Right.
How did you figure that out so quickly, not being a real estate person? And tell us the process also.
Yeah. So, I mean, to be, you know, I guess because we had been there so long, or not so long, but a couple of years already at the point when we took it over. I had a design in my head already, you know, like these are the spaces that would work the best for us. And then over time, we also started learning about things like fire code. So it was like, you know, some of the rooms maybe that I would have turned into classrooms right away, we didn't, because they wouldn't have met fire code. So, you know, you have to position yourself in a certain place for that. And then honestly, I think just kind of took a leap of faith with, you know, like, okay, let's just put the rooms here and then go from there, you know? And that's really what we did. Like, again, we have this designer that worked with us that did the planning for us. But yeah, it was just like, well, let's build these walls. And then we did. And it, you know, it all worked out really well.
And so I'm going to ask you a somewhat personal question.
Sure.
How did you pay for all this?
So at that point, the business had been profitable.
Okay. After 3 years.
Right. Yeah. Because now we're 4 years in.
Right.
So it took about 3 years to be profitable. And we had been planning to lease a different space. And we had been saving for the build out for that space. Just with, you know, like tuition. We have we work right into our budget, a little bit of extra money. We had worked in a little extra money for construction costs. But we were on a budget with the project. It wasn't like a high end, you know, like the last wing didn't get new floors.
Right.
You know,
right.
So, but it was all, we completely funded with money that we had saved for the business.
So we would say you just used cash.
Yeah. Just cash.
No financing.
No financing. Yeah. You know,
You have
hopefully
no
not
debt.
ever. I have no debt. Yeah. I'm not really interested in debt. So hopefully we won't, hopefully the roof won't cave in anytime soon, because that's when I'll go into debt. But otherwise, yeah.
I think you should know how much of an anomaly that is in real estate.
Right. Yeah.
Like, doesn't exist, rarely exists, that someone has the wherewithal to use all of their cash, continue to be profitable, and grow at the same time.
Right. I mean, I'm not going to say there weren't a few scary moments, you know, there over the years, especially.
Like what?
And then I mean, there was a point where my husband and I had to put some of our own money into the school, because we were like, oh, this is getting the first time we did construction on our upstairs before we even had the building. It was like, oh, this was a little more expensive than we were expecting. So we put a little bit of our own money in there. And then right after this project finished, it was like, okay, well, we need to start, make sure our enrollment's all set, make sure we have all our ducks in a row, because we were down to 0, which is scary for me, because I like to have a lot more than 0. So
that's strange.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was a scary thing, but then now we're, already back to where we want to be. So it's, kind of works out.
You're really understating the magnitude of what you're accomplishing, to being profitable so quickly, 3 years, using cash to expand, back to being profitable, in what most people would consider a nonprofit business.
Right. Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah, I don't really think of it in terms of profit though, because
because you're a nice person.
Maybe, but I think it's well, what else can we do now? What project are we going to take on next? And I think that's kind of built into what we're doing is we build that into our budget as what are we going to buy? That's are we going to buy state of the art, video recording equipment, for example, for our discovery lab, that's all built into what we do.
Yeah. It's because you truly have a mission, and your mission is your passion, and you're focusing on that mission and subsequent passion, which is leading to profitability. Those two things come before the money. Is that accurate?
I would say so. Yeah. Because I don't think I'm personally not driven by the idea of making money. I don't really need a lot of money myself, so I don't I'm not one to buy fancy things or anything.
Right.
So I think we're thinking of how can this benefit the school, and making sure that we have some money saved in case, something goes right. In case the roof does cave in, something like that.
There's an infinite number of case studies that clearly point to the fact that if you put the mission before the profit and you focus on the mission, that you will become profitable. If you do things correctly, you can't make really bad decisions, of course, but if the motivation is truly to support the mission, then you're going to be investing in that motivation.
Right. Versus yourself.
Right.
Yeah. I've seen people start these types of schools for the wrong reason.
Right.
As a business, and it's not a business, it's education isn't a business, or it shouldn't be.
But yet they're treating it like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I also understand that it's in your name, micro school, but you don't have a big team either, right? So you have 100 kids.
Right. We have about 20 people on staff now, though.
Okay.
So not all full time, but yeah.
Okay. So how is it kind of being a manager?
I think if you hire the right people, you don't feel like you're managing. So that has helped a lot. I don't really think of myself as a manager.
Right.
It's a very collaborative team.
Right.
So I think that helps too. If there's a big decision to be made, we usually talk about it as a team.
And then
but it's like the greatest team to work with. So I don't feel like it's work,
Right. Do you ever disagree with the group decisions?
I mean, one thing, like I'm pretty easygoing about things. Like, so
you can barely tell by the way.
Like if, there's certain things I do feel strongly about. And I think like I've probably purposely picked people who support those things that I feel strongly about. Like I never want to like raise our tuition $5,000 in 1 year or something like that, So like the people that I work with are on board with that sort of thing. The little day-to-day, you can't get caught up in that. It's like, are we going to have Spirit Day on Friday? Sure. I don't care, So if you, as long as you don't get caught up in those small things, it works out really well.
That's good feedback for me personally. Like literally I'm listening to you saying like, she's right. Like you should not
let it go.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. So Emily said that, she put this whole thing together because of what the listeners are finding out now, that you have a very unique story. And you have a true entrepreneurial effort going right now that I don't think you completely appreciate as much as I do, because I know how much work goes into starting from zero. And you are understating it by a lot. Like,
no, it has been a lot of work.
Right.
I don't want to understate that.
Right.
Like it has, but
Right.
It's like, I enjoy it,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Of course. So Emily wanted me to discuss with you being a strong woman leader, starting this entire effort. And she felt, and I do too, that that's a major component to some of your success. Why do you think that is? Or do you agree with that?
I don't know. I don't know if being a woman is a major component to my success.
Mm-hmm.
I think like some of my philosophy probably is more like my husband doesn't always agree with my philosophy, for example, is more like coming from a nurturing perspective, which I guess would be like kind of my maternal quality. But I don't know that the success is necessarily because I'm a woman, but I think like what I want my daughters to see is that like they can do this too. So like when my daughters play careers, especially my older, because she's 10 now, like her career choices are all about owning and running something. She's going to own and run her pet shop or her acting studio. And I want her and like all the girls at our school to see that like, you can do these things too. Like this isn't something a man needs to do, so in that way, I would say, yeah.
Was there ever any hesitation for you starting this?
Honestly, no,
Yeah.
Because it started so like not organically, but in some ways it did start really organically, right? It was just like, oh, I'm going to have a few kids in my living room. This is like, nothing, right? And then it just kept growing. So I think the biggest, there came a point where it was like, okay, are we going to jump here?
Right.
And that was really after the first year, when it was like, we went from being this little learning pod in my house to a private school. That was the jump. Right. And at that point I was like, well, yeah, I'm going to do this because I will never go back to, what I was doing before.
Right.
So it wasn't even a question. Yeah.
So I think it's important for people to have an understanding of some of the regulatory thresholds that you've had to meet, especially kind of being in your own building now. In Florida, there's, I'm going to say this completely wrong, but you please correct me.
Sure.
There is a stipend that parents are afforded to pay for private schools.
Yeah.
Kind of no questions asked.
For the most part. Yeah. It's very easy.
That's right.
Yeah.
And is it $8,500 per student per year?
It actually varies. That's on the low end.
Oh,
so
okay.
It's somewhere between $7,500 for the most basic up to like I've known kids who got closer to $20,000.
Okay, which is a lot.
Depending on, different
That's
factors.
Right. But the school has to meet certain criteria to allow the state to fund that tuition.
Right.
And you do.
We do. Yeah. This is our first year of even really going for this fully, because there was a lot of red tape involved in taking state funding. But yeah, now we have met that.
And so you probably get this giant email with a PDF is it 100 pages?
Oh, probably more, right?
Right. And you have to comply with everything.
Everything, yeah.
Which is inclusive of what? Give us some examples.
So like in terms of the building requirements first, because that was kind of where we went first, is like, so it was fire inspection, health inspection, but you can't get a fire inspection until you're compliant with zoning regulations, which was like that was the most hoops we had to jump through, honestly, was proving that we were able to exist as a private school in the building that we're in.
Right.
Based on different statutes. And so then, so fire, then we were finally able to get our fire inspection and pass that. Health inspection, there's like a financial stability component, and then background screenings for me and all the other employees and personnel files. And then there's a lot of ongoing,
compliance.
Records, compliance. Yeah.
Do you realize how big of a deal that is? That you got it that quickly?
Oh, yeah. Well,
yeah.
It felt like forever for us, because it's,
right.
You're talking about people's money.
For sure.
So families don't want to leave like $10,000 sitting on the table, right? So we were hoping to have it a year sooner, honestly, but we just didn't have everything in place we needed to get it.
That's right.
Then. So, yeah, we're thrilled, though, to be able to get there now.
And do you think that it attracts a larger pool of students for you now?
I don't know, honestly. Like, I would have said, yes, this is so important. Everybody needs this. But like, we had a good group of families that were there without it. And I kind of do ask myself, like, if this goes away, because this could go away anytime, right? This is state funding. This could change like that, So we have to make sure that we have a good group of families that can be with us, and that we start developing means for them to get financial support if and when this isn't there anymore. So I think we'll still be, solid without it if it goes away at some point.
Right.
But I think it's a huge help to people. So I'm glad we can do it.
Yeah. Therein lies the relationship community part of what you're doing. You feel like your base is very much invested in your philosophy, your teaching philosophy, your community philosophy, and it's working for them.
Right.
Yeah.
It would be, I think for a lot of us, it would be hard to imagine going to, something different at this point, for myself, even for my own kids.
Sure. So once you get to 150 students, maybe, then what?
That's a good question. Today we're going up to 8th. So that's our, we'll grow a year.
You'll hire a 7th grade teacher, then an 8th grade teacher.
Yeah, like then it gets into subject area people.
Okay.
But we've already started working on that. So today was the first time we actually said, like, well, would we do high school?
Really?
So normally I say no when people ask that. So maybe we'll expand to high school.
Do you have capacity in 20,000 square feet?
We do. Yeah. That's the nice thing about the building, right? Because right now we do sublease to other tenants because there's extra spaces. And
see, you are a real estate person.
Well, there's so many, it's a community center too. So there are so many programs that depend on that space. So I wouldn't want to say, no, you cannot not use this gym at 8 p.m. when I'm not here, So, so we do have space because of some of the spaces are sublet out right now.
This next topic I want to discuss is something that I'm not proud to discuss, and I'm not excited to discuss, but it needs discussion.
Sure.
And that's security.
Yeah.
How do you talk about that, and what do you do about it?
Yeah, so that was the first change we made when we took over the management of the building is because unfortunately now, schools can be targeted. So we changed to a controlled access system and upgraded all our video cameras and so that nobody can just walk in off the street. I mean, does that mean you're secure? No, I mean, you're never 100% secure, right? but we're doing the most we can to keep our kids safe in that way. So at least, strangers can't wander into their classrooms, right? So it's all about kind of like locking everything down, having a plan for if something did happen, making sure teachers are aware of where they would go and what they would do. And just being diligent.
Is that practiced? Is there a drill for that?
We don't practice it with our students. We don't do a lockdown drill. So our classes are really small. So our average class size is 10. So we have our teachers practice what they would do. And they have the relationship with their students where they would listen, but it's just causes so much anxiety for kids to practice an active shooter drill that we don't practice it with the kids.
I'm like questioning myself whether to say this next part, but it is topical. So I was with my daughter in her school 2 years ago, a year ago, and we were talking to her guidance counselor, and over the intercom, very quietly, the person said, "This is not a drill." I can't remember the exact words. "This is not a drill. Lockdown."
Wow.
And that was as simple as it was said, quietly. And all of a sudden, doors closed, lights off, hover in a corner away from the door. And we sat in the dark for 30 minutes.
Wow.
Because there was someone in the area who was suspected of having a gun.
Right.
And so it was out of an abundance of caution that there was a lockdown. But this is normal now.
Yeah.
And how do you talk about that with parents?
I think like for parents, it's just the reassurance that we do have a plan in place, that like the safety of the kids is the number one priority for us. I think like it is sad that we have to talk about this, right? Like, and like to have to sit in a dark room for 30 minutes and wonder if something is really going to happen. I know like statistically the chances of something happening are pretty small. So I think like I do think that helps. Like that always helps me with my own kid, to realize like, okay, realistically, like, the chances of it happening are so small. But if it does, we have what we need, we're ready,
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
What do you think that you have failed at starting this venture?
That's a great question. I mean, nothing's a real failure, right? When something goes wrong, you just turn it around. I mean, if anything, I think probably like the real estate side is definitely not my biggest success. I think that's probably like, if you ask my husband, that's what he would say, because just to be honest, we lost money in trying to, secure other locations for the school. I think we got it now, but there were definitely failures in that area along the way. And that cost money. So that's, it's money that could have been put into the school.
The real estate.
It's always the real estate, but that's how you learn. I mean, we didn't know what we were doing.
That's right.
So, it was the cost of learning.
Yeah, that's great.
Right.
Angela, we are so happy you're here. You are so nice.
Thank you.
I don't want to ask you any questions that would offend you.
I'm not easily offended either. So
this is great. Well, thank you so much for kind of showing us that the same principles are applied to so many different types of industries. People don't think of education as a business, and you don't. But ultimately, you found out that you kind of have to know some stuff to run an organization, and you're doing that. And I'm glad you're doing it here.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is fun. Thanks.